This is Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. We have a very special guest for you today. Jerry West is with us. He is the logo, actually, of the NBA, but he's a legend. He's lived an incredible life. He's overcome a lot. So I think you're going to want to stay tuned. Jerry West, The Good Life, is next. This is Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson, and I have a real special guest today. Jerry West is with me. Most of you probably know Jerry. 9 NBA championships as a player, as an executive, 14-time consecutive All-Star. Probably, in my opinion, and most opinions, the best NBA executive ever. He was the first ever draft pick of the Los Angeles Lakers, which I found out, the number 2 overall Hall of Famer, and recently received the Medal of Freedom from President Trump at the White House. So he doesn't like to talk about himself a lot, but I wanted to do it. And he's obviously a very special person, not just because of basketball, but because of his life. He just has kind of the magic touch, it seems like, when he goes to an organization. So I'm pleased to have Jerry West with us.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, I appreciate it.
I wanted to just start with basketball in terms of, it looks like we may have a season. What are your thoughts on this new plan and the Clippers' prospects?
Well, first of all, this has been probably one of the most awkward year that I think I've ever seen in my life. Okay, I think we've all gone through things where we've seen this country not at its best, and certainly with everything that's going on here in the last, my goodness, 9 months, it certainly is pretty remarkable to even think that they're considering having a basketball season. They've invested, I'm talking about the NBA league, has invested a lot of time, a lot of resources to make this possible. So fans will have a chance to watch some competition for a while. For me right now, my life is about, all I do is read. I probably read 50 books since this pandemic has started. But the NBA obviously wants to have a conclusion to the season. And if you look when the season was interrupted, I think it was like March 19th or something like that. And now they're doing their due diligence as far as the virus is concerned. And again, I think there's players that are reluctant to play.
Right.
And that that to me is the awkward part, because I don't think you want to force anyone to do anything that they don't want to do. But the one thing you want to do is to make sure that these players have a chance to win a championship or decide who's the best team in the league at this point in time. So the precautions they've taken with exploring the possibilities in Florida have been extraordinary and very careful in terms of trying to talk about the players' health. So with that being said, I think there's an awkward part of it, to be honest with you, to be away from your families, potentially almost 3 months, to getting through this without any players contracting the virus. As you're well aware, Florida now is on the uptick in terms of this virus. And it tells you social distancing, people practicing what is being preached. And they've almost proven if you wear a mask, this is going to be a huge stop to this spreading this virus. And so I myself try to follow those guidelines very, very closely. But I'm hopeful we have a season. There's something about having a crowd there that I think it makes it a lot more exciting, but we're hopeful we have an opportunity as a member of the Clippers organization to win a championship and also to prove that we have a champion of the NBA, regardless of who it might be. But there's players that the Lakers just had a player, Avery Bradley, who's a very good player, dropped out for a family concern. He has a son that has some kind of respiratory problem, and Avery's one of the nicest people you've ever want to meet in your life. And also, I think this is a time that a lot of NBA players, because of all this social unrest, which to me is what they should be doing, talking about how to make this a better world. I have watched over the years, because I read so much, and because I was born in West Virginia, which really is not a southern state, it's a northern state. But yet, unless you study the history of what's going on in this country, this is the most embarrassing thing that I have ever seen in my life. I'm furious about it, the treatment of the black race for years and years and years. I think politicians and leaders, they need to focus on the goals about where they want to go. And this is not putting putting a little ceiling over the top of it. This is about correcting the darn problem. And unless we have leaders that don't forget about this, people forget about things, okay? Once they find a virus, a vaccine for this virus, they'll forget about it, okay? It'll be written back in time, but people forget about history too much. And this is a chance to really make a statement for the black race. And these athletes who are the most popular in the world, and particularly NBA players, they have the greatest platform I've ever seen to reach out and make this a cause that will never be forgotten. And to completely change the social disparity in this world. It's not fair, it's not right. It makes me angry to see it, because, as I say, when I played, my best friends were my black teammates, and people I admired greatly. We had roommates and I always had black roommates. And it was probably the greatest education I ever had in my life.
Wow. Reflecting a little bit just quickly on your Clippers tenure, I read in your book that the Clippers were kind of stuck before they traded Blake Griffin. And I know that was a hard trade for Steve Ballmer, and I know obviously people like me that love the Clippers and the Lakers actually, but you said that you mentioned that they were stuck. Of course, and this is the effect you have on me. So I've been a Laker and Clipper fan for 30 years.
Well, that's good.
Both, yeah. And there wasn't a real rivalry in the Showtime era, so I could be both. In fact, I'd be watching the Showtime Lakers would be up by so much most of the time. I'd flip to the Clippers because it was more interesting.
Well, that was okay then because I was working with the Lakers.
right. But what happens to me, Jerry, is so we see Blake Griffin's traded, we see Chris Paul's traded, and normally, those are very popular players. Normally, a guy like me would be like, oh man, but then I just had the thought Jerry West is there. Well, he knows what he's doing.
Well, you know what? What's really interesting about that is that teams reach a certain point where there's nowhere for them to elevate beyond the position they were, and the Clippers were stuck, particularly financially. They didn't have the wherewithal to go attract other players. They had little or no flexibility in terms of being stuck in the middle. If you get stuck in the middle in the NBA, you are going to be stuck for a while, because, frankly, the amount of money that played to players today, you have to spend a lot of money to maintain any team. But if you don't have the players, if Blake had had more help around him, he would have been terrific, okay? But as I mentioned, he is a great guy, tough as heck, smart. He had all the elements that you'd want to have in your house, okay? So with a lot of discussions that we'd had internally, Chris Paul was gone, who's been a tremendous player in his life. And so these changes were going to be made. And it certainly wasn't my choice or my decision. I'm a consultant. And as we sat there and talked about this and talked about it, it did make more sense to do it. And we were able to, through the efforts of our front office, Lawrence Frank, Michael Winger, and also our owner, Steve Ballmer, who is a remarkable owner. You're not going to find a better owner than him. He's just amazing. Those were really tough days because you hate trading players. I don't care who they are. You hate trading them because you do get attached to them. But this is about competition. The most competitive people play the most competitive games, and it can't be more competitive than playing a professional basketball game. And since that trade was made, we have one of the best teams in the league, period. And we're deep, and we're young. Right. The right age. I mean, if you look at a graph of players, here's the top age up here. You don't want it going this way. You actually want it going this way. So we have a nice mix of veteran players, a lot of players that are really right in their prime now. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, who's been hurt a lot this year for the Clippers. This is an ascending team, and a team that has a chance to be very relevant for 5 years. Very relevant. And I think we all have confidence that we're as competitive as anyone else. And it's a team that's very capable of winning a championship, that's for sure.
Yeah. How did things like getting Ivica Zubac for Mike Muscala? I mean, it just seems like you have a way of piecing, and I know that when you said it kind of fell in your lap, but it just seems like, the Pat Beverleys, the just getting the glue guys, the pieces that it just seems like you, or when you're there, whoever, I know Lawrence Frank's the general manager, has a knack for doing that. The Warriors, now the Clippers, you kind of, you obviously had some success in Memphis, not as much as you would have wanted, but it seems like you have a knack for doing that.
Well, first of all, as I say, I'm a consultant, period. I was a consultant with the Warriors. I do have a voice in terms of making tough decisions. I don't make the final decision, and I've never shied away from saying that. I happen to work with people who are really capable, and the decisions that have been made have been spot on. And watching the Warriors, watching that team to develop because of one trade, and one player acquisition gave this team with the Warriors a chance to be a dominant team for four years. And they're going to be good again because they had a rash of injuries last year. But I think the most important thing is get people who care about basketball, who like basketball, and have some feel for the game. To me, it would be like the first home that a person ever built, okay? The first person who drove that nail. I wonder how confident he would be when he got through with the house, when he first started, and he could see the house develop. I say to myself, oh my gosh, if he was kind of an independent contractor doing this house himself for someone, you'd say to yourself, oh my gosh, I hope this turns out the way it's supposed to. But it's the same way in sports, the same way in life. People start businesses and they have these high hopes that they're going to accomplish something really important. And at the end of the day, their idea may not work so well. So unless they have the intestinal fortitude to say, hey, look, I made a mistake, admit that mistake and move on. And some people can't do that. And the most important thing is not to lose sight of your goals. what you're trying to do as an organization. And I've been fortunate to work with owners and people who want to succeed at the highest level. And every year, certain teams, you look in the standings and they're the same place every year. And this league is designed, the NBA is designed for parity, as all leagues are. I wonder if every team in every league play at a 500 level, would you have the same interests? I don't think you would. You need the villain up here. Right. You need the guys climbing the steps to try to jump on top of him. Right. And that's why I think it makes sports so fascinating. When I was little, I used to like to climb top of mountains, and they'd be real steep. You get way up there and you look, and you get on top, oh my goodness, and then you see another mountain over there to climb. But if you're in sports, you get up that top of that mountain and you look behind you, and there's a bunch of people trying to catch you. So you can't stop trying to get to the top of the mountain. Yeah. And particularly when things go kind of go dark for you, negative, you don't have the kind of success you want to have. That's when you have to have really a strong organization and people who want to implement whatever respective goals they are. But also the best people, I think, are the ones who are the best risk takers. And there's a big difference between risk taking and gambling. Here's my definition between a risk and a gamble. If you go to Las Vegas and somebody gives you $100, okay, and you're going to play blackjack, simple game, right? Somebody turns cards over and 21 or blackjack, you're going to do pretty well if you get those. But the key is that if you would take your $100 and put it down on play one hand, right? One hand. You lose $100, that's a gamble. You're done. You leave, okay? But if you got four $25 chips, you could lose the first three and then win with the $25 remaining chip you have left, and you could get to the top of the mountain. You could sit there all night and win a lot of money. Right. That's the difference between a risk and a gamble, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's good. That's interesting. Jerry West wrote a book, West by West. I've been devouring it over the last 48 hours. It's extremely interesting. It's, as we talked about earlier today, it's not necessarily really a purely basketball book at all. It's really about your life. And as I read about your brother, and I know sometimes it can be difficult to talk about, he died at 22 in Korea. You were 13. You were very close to him. You had a high level of respect for him. He was a man of faith. I read about, he would write these letters to your mother, and he'd send money to make sure Christmas was okay. And you write in here that he had a profound impact on you still. What have you learned from him that has stayed with you, or tell us about your brother, anything.
Some people are just inherently good, and some people are inherently dangerous, okay? And when I say dangerous, I'm not talking about criminals, okay? But he was the most unique person. Everyone loved him. As you mentioned, he was deeply religious. He would do anything for people in our neighborhood, no one really had anything. And it was just a bunch of working class people who were trying to make ends meet. And as I say, he was unique. He was just one of those people, if you talked to him, he had this wonderful way about him. And I looked at him and I said to myself, my goodness, I wish I could be someone like him, who always encouraged me when things weren't so good at home. And when he got killed, I'll never forget that day. I had gone up to get the mail from my mother. It was about a mile away from where we lived, and obviously I ran. And on my way back, I stopped at this drugstore to get a piece of bubble gum or something. And this lady said, "I just heard your brother got killed." I said, "What?" "Yeah, I just heard your brother got killed." And I immediately ran home. I could hear my mother crying for probably 50 yards from my house. And I get there, and there was this Army gentleman there with my mother. There were two of them, and officially notifying him he'd been killed. And I stayed there a while, and I just was like frozen, because I could not believe that someone like him could ever get killed, because he was so unique and so religious. And when I think my sister came there and with my mother, and I got my fishing pole and I took off. And I went out to the river and sat there and reflected back on the times that I'd spent with him. And obviously I hadn't spent a lot of time with him because he left home at 18.
Oh, he did.
And to go into the Army, or 19 rather. And so for 3 years, very little contact. He came home a couple of times on furlough. And it was like I had gone from a pretty aggressive kid to this meek person who went into a shell and really I didn't want to be around anyone. It was really hard. And as my family has passed away, I now have his letters that were written during the time of the war. And every once in a while I'll go through and read those letters. And very simple and very quick, because they were driven in and out of Seoul, Korea, I think 3 times when he was there by the North Koreans. And he got yellow jaundice, had to be sent to Japan. We thought he was way past his time to be repatriated back to the States. And he went back and he was killed like a week later once he got back. And it was like losing something really special in their life. It was beginning of a whole new me, to be honest with you.
Wow. And that combined with, I mean, I read about you had an abusive father, and you weren't, it wasn't because you were a bad kid. You had an abusive father. And so I was just trying to digest this morning about, you know, this, you're in a house you don't want to be in. It's not safe. And then your brother, who maybe was a little bit of a protector, possibly.
Well, he was so highly, he was like the golden child in our family, and so he was like, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but he was like a golden child in our family. But it was almost like this bright light in your house was very dim. The house was very dim after that, and so. My life changed completely. Didn't want to be around anyone. I got to the point where I wouldn't even eat. And they had to actually take me to the doctor's office and give me vitamin shots.
You just wouldn't eat?
I wouldn't eat. I didn't go home. When I left in the morning, I didn't come back. And I just wanted to be by myself. But these are things, I think, we all face different kind of challenges in our lives. And honestly, I think it's what makes you stronger, more caring, for sure.
Yeah.
And particularly as you get older.
Yeah. That's one of the things that stands out to me about your life. So you, because of your dad and your father, that abuse, there was kind of an anger. You know, you said there was a chip on your shoulder that, you became really successful. Was that in part due to that fire that you were going to prevail? You use the word defiant a lot in this book. I mean, there was a sense. Did that come out of your childhood of kind of that, I'm going to win here?
Well, I think one of the things that as you're growing up, depending on how you grow up, people talk about love. It's a word I hardly ever use. I really didn't know what love was as a kid. I know there's a lot of people I care about a lot, but I still don't. I still have a hard time with that word. I think what you see is what you sow. What you feel is what you sow. And I think there's so many like chips in the granite that they never really heal. I mean, no matter what restoration project that you take. But I think the gratification I got out of playing sports was that for all the people that said, no, you can't do this, I did do it. And Frank Sinatra's song, I Did It My Way, I've always tried to live my life that way, but I'm still defiant.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you dare cross me, okay? Don't you dare tell me something that's not true, because I think you're dealing with people, and you want to have a close relationship with someone. Those bonds are important.
Yeah.
And to try to have someone to deceive you, and I have been deceived in my life because I want to believe, not anymore.
You want to believe the best.
You better, with me, what you see with me is what you get.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's something I don't believe in, I will tell you.
Yeah.
I will tell you. And where somebody, it's like this people who make decisions. They make decisions based upon every fact, it's like, I don't think you can make every decision like that. Somewhere along the way, something inside of you tells you that decision is wrong. Mm-hmm. I think a pretty good example is, there's one school in this country that everyone clamors to have someone from Harvard to work for them, okay? When there might be some kid that goes to some small college that has a very good resume, and because of Harvard's reputation and the great people that have accomplished a lot of things in this world, particularly here in the States, there's really qualified people back there that here in the States that get overlooked. Because people sometimes don't look at a person's resume. But if you could read what's in some person's mind or what's some person's heart, you can have all the talent in the world. If you don't know what's here and here, and that's where the guessing comes in. But there's one thing, regardless of what talent you have, regardless of what you're doing in your life, if you don't have a work ethic, I don't care how talented you are, and if you don't set goals for yourself, you're not going to accomplish anything in life. You're going to be teasing yourself the whole life. So you got to be tough-minded enough to set goals. And as I say, I'm a real big, huge reader, a huge reader. And when I was in college, I hated to read, but becoming a professional athlete, I hardly went out of my room unless we would go together to have dinner the night before a game or something. But hardly ever went out of my room. And this was the discipline that I had, and I didn't want to go out. So after games, I couldn't sleep, so I started reading. And I read for pleasure then. And all I do is to try to read books that would stimulate me, and I usually read books about people great leaders. I have one book, one person, Malcolm Gladwell, his books, I'm a big fan of his, a real big fan. And he writes things that appeal to me, and that I have all these books, sort of always wanted to meet him. And he's fascinating, some of the things that he writes about. But I just like to learn, and I think you learn a lot from being around completely opposite people than yourself. You also can learn about people who talk about themselves and praise themselves that are empty suits, to be honest with you. I think I'm a pretty good judge of people and people who really do care.
Speaking of reading, you in your book you quote Thomas Merton. The almond tree bears its fruit in silence. And you are not a big talker, and you're not a big talker about yourself, but you say that quote described how you hope to conduct yourself in life. How so?
Well, first, one of the Lakers coaches, Paul Westhead, was a very smart man, and when they let him go, when the Lakers let him go, and I was there, it wasn't my decision to let him go. Period. It was not. And when they let him go, he brought that quote up, okay? And I'm saying to myself, this makes sense. It really makes sense. And some of the simplest things that people say and do resonate with me. I have probably in my files of stuff that I read, quotes from people made over the years. J.C. Penney probably had one of the greatest one that I've ever heard in my life, and these young men over here and people who are around don't remember J.C. Penney. He was at one time the greatest entrepreneur in America in terms of retailing. Mm-hmm. And he said something that was really, he was talking about goals. He says, show me a stock clerk with a goal, and I'll show you a man who'll make history. Show me a stock clerk without a goal, and I'll show you a stock clerk. Mm. Pretty simple, but true. Yeah. Just little things have always resonated with me. Some of the people who have made things that I often refer to in talking to people, and I find it very interesting to when I'm sometimes when I'm on dark moods, which I have sometimes. Mm-hmm. I'll go get those bunch of quotes in there, and I'll start reading them, and I might see some in there, so this might resonate with me and make me get out of this abyss I'm in right now.
That was going to be the last question, kind of in this area. That was going to be my next question: is the abyss. You know, you talk your childhood really affected you, and you talk about depression, which millions of people struggle with, mostly in silence. It's been taboo. You said sometimes it was hard for you to be in your house alone. Fear of abandonment. You have some scars, I guess, that have stuck. And I'm just wondering, I think there may be people watching who are suffering in silence, whether it be anxiety, depression, going into an abyss, feeling worthless or not lovable. Or would you have anything to say based on your experience? I know it's not something you kick, but based on your experience, Jerry, what have you learned that somebody else might glean from?
Well, I think because people for so many years have swept things under the rug when it comes to their own personal feeling. And obviously I was reluctant to talk about things like that for a long time. And now it's become kind of a movement, and people are talking about mental health. I guess it's a part of mental health, but it's a completely different part, because if you look at the person, many of them are healthy looking, strong, but there are just some places in your life when you really wonder what you're contributing to society, what you're contributing to your family. And sometimes I have friends that ask me, why are you so quiet today? And you don't want to go into it, but I would say to everyone, learn how to cope with it. Mm-hmm. Some people can cope with it, but I'm sure with this virus, the people that have been so isolated with this virus, that the people that have this dark spot in their lives, I'm guessing that this has been a very trying time for them. Yeah. Because when I'm like that, the one thing that I still do, I still work out and try to take care of myself. And I find that the darker the day, I almost feel like this pull I have a gym at my house. I almost feel like this pull to go in there and do something physical. There's other days that I have a bunch of friends where we used to have lunch, not a bunch, about 5 or 6 guys, that we have lunch together, and I look forward to that. And I'll have some days that I won't do anything. I just don't even want to go out of the house.
Wow.
Even today.
Has it gotten better at all? Or is it the same?
I really think the thing that makes it better, when I see positive things happen in the world, when I see stories that young kids, something fantastic happens to them, something that they achieve in their lives. And I see the joy on the faces of parents when they have, holding a newborn kid, or one of their kids have done something in school. Maybe it would be in sports, maybe it would be academically, but acts of kindness. When I get this way, acts of kindness are always how I reciprocate. And then what can you do? You can give money if you have enough to do it. And it might be something that might seem strange for people, but we have a lot of homeless people, and every once in a while when I'm in one of those moods, if I see or have an opportunity, I'll make sure I give somebody some money. Never knowing if it's going to go to drugs or food, but it's just something like that. If I can do or give something to make a difference in life. And I know when my brother got killed in Korea, there's a learning center at West Virginia University. It's got part of it. And there's like 7 different places there. No, 3, I think. And the David West Learning Center at West Virginia University, where kids have a chance to go in and use computers and have tutors there to help them. That's something that I feel good about, that I could do. And every once in a while when I go back to university, I don't really. When I go there, it's sort of awkward when you go and there's a statue of you somewhere else. There's a Jerry West Boulevard that runs through to Morgantown, West Virginia. When I see that, I wish that they would kind of cover it up when I'm there. But those are the good things in life, when you can do things like that you can help someone maybe achieve some of their goals in life.
Yeah, you wrote about that. You said, I like to help other people achieve their dreams. Yeah. And you have this generous spirit that I know you probably won't talk about, but I met you once when I was 19 years old. I got press credentials when I was at Westmont College. I don't know how I got press credentials because our radio station reached about 18 people, roughly.
Right.
But John Black gave me press credentials, so I came to Loyola Marymount to the practice where the year Kobe came.
Right.
And I saw you in the parking lot, and I'm just this, I'm still nobody, but I was nobody then too. But I asked you if I could interview you. You stopped in the parking lot and let me interview you.
Sure.
And I mean, that's just, it's a random thing that I remember, but it just kind of shows the kind of guy you are. So
as I say, I don't try to judge what kind of person I am. That's for others to decide. I think the most important thing is try to live by the principles that make me feel good in life. And try to help kids. I've often said that sometimes just grabbing a kid and putting your hand on him, and particularly when I was, as a player, there's obviously a lot more allure to kids wanting to know you. And now they look at me and, well, there's the logo, right? And which is flattering in itself. But I just like to see kids and people who are hardworking and who really care accomplish something. There's so many people in this world that could give so much more of their time to make a difference. And this country, unfortunately, I think the one thing that seems to resonate with everyone is how much money someone has. Right. That's not the judge of a person or a character of a person at all.
I want to talk about Kobe. And I was reading in here that you said when you saw Kobe's workout at the Inglewood YMCA, you said, I've never in my life have I seen a workout like that. And you said you looked in his eyes and you could see what he wanted. Could you talk about, and I think the story of you and Kobe is fascinating to me, and I'll just say it real quick, because, and I didn't ever get to see you play, but my dad did, and my dad was a big fan, and what was interesting is when kids were crumpling up the piece of paper and throwing it in the trash can, it was Jerry West. And then when they were crippling up the piece of paper and throwing it in the trash can, it was Kobe. That's what they are today. And so you have that thing, and then of course he passed you. Although I don't think he would have passed you if you'd had a 3-point shot and not been injured for 2 years, maybe.
Well, he played a lot more years than I did.
Right. But you have this link in terms of the last shot, making the last shot. And you said you like taking the last shot in part because your home was so out of control growing up that it was almost like that's the way you could write your own ending. And I think that's fascinating. But I want to talk about when you first saw Kobe and kind of what that was like. And then what was the relationship like? He came to your house at 17 years old, couldn't even drive your son Ryan's driving him around. What was how was the relationship from start to finish?
Well, first of all, I think too much has been talked about the 2 workouts we had with him. He was just simply the most gifted player that we had ever worked out, not even close. And I think that time it wasn't in vogue to draft young players of that age unless they were taller, because everyone then was looking for taller, bigger players. And but just watching him, it was pretty easy to see that there was no one more skilled than him at 17 years of age. I mean, he was like someone, he had this insatiable desire to get better, even then. And once we were able to go through the process of acquiring him, which took a lot to get him, the thing that I think that was most noticeable then, he really didn't have that edge that he had later in his career. And obviously his success probably fueled that. But it's just a nice kid who, effervescent, bubbly. He had dinner at our house a few times. And in some respects we were, I guess, caretakers for him for a while until practice started. The one thing he found about, he was just so pleasant to be around, and he was very smart, and very worldly, because he lived and grew up in Italy, right, with his father playing professional basketball over there. And his desire to get better. One summer when I was still capable enough to move around a little bit, I would go with him and show him some things I thought were important for his growth as a player, and he just dribbled. He wanted to do everything behind his back, between his legs, and that's all well and good in certain periods of games to escape people, but there's a simplistic way which makes the game a lot easier. But more importantly, it makes it easier for your teammates to play with you. And it was a learning process for him to go from being this really dominant player as a high school player, and also in the summer leagues at time when he played. And we drew these enormous crowds with him there to watch him play. He was, he would have 35 points or something, but it wasn't a pretty 35, okay? And it wasn't an efficient 35, but after a point in time, he really had got to be, with experience and playing with teammates, he toned his game down and became the player he was. And it's fun to see the transition from like watching a young kid crawl to all of a sudden get up and just take off running, and you're scared to death that he's going to run through a wall. Well, this guy, and the scary part of it was that when he was young, he would go play anywhere with anyone, parks. And I remember one day, right before training camp, I get a call from our trainer, and he says, well, Kobe just broke his wrist or hand, well, part of one of his hands. And we're just getting ready to go to training camp, and I just shook my head, because I kept cautioning him. I said, don't do this. You just can't do this, okay? And so he goes to training camp, and we go to training camp. Here he is with a cast on his arm over there, and looked like if there's a floor there, it looked like he dug trenches in, trying to, you can just see him squirming around, wanting to get out there. So his first training camp was really wasted. But as I say, to watch the remarkable growth and the indelible mark that he left on this city, and more importantly, the world, when he passed away. One of those senseless things that you say to yourself, my gosh, why at this age of his life, with a beautiful family, and he was going to be just as successful in his second career as he was as an athlete. Mm-hmm. I say he was very bright, very talented, and he was charming.
Yeah,
he had it all, and as I say, the city had been blessed to see the greatest basketball players ever this one franchise has had, the Lakers, mm-hmm. ever.
Did his passing, I mean, I saw you on TV saying, I don't think I'm ever going to get over this.
Well, you don't, because, as I say, when you get my age, I'm 82 now, and you get my age, I've basically lived my life, okay, I have. And, you just hope that maybe you can contribute a few more things, and you don't. There's not a lot left. And you see a person that's taken too young, that had a full life ahead of him, and could have done some things that would have transcended race. He was a difference maker, mm-hmm. and he was a leader. We don't have a lot of those people.
Right.
We don't. We have a lot of great players or great guys and everything, but he had that unique quality to, as I say, he was more than a basketball player. He was a iconic figure both on and off the course.
Yeah, it felt like to me, I'm a Southern LA kid, but I don't remember something like his passing. I mean, it seemed like the city, it really hit the city hard. I mean, he had that 20-year bond, and it seemed like of course this year we've almost we've had to move on to the pandemic and to the protests and all this other stuff, but that period of time, I mean, it really hit the city hard when he was gone.
Well, it was like a pall over the city. It was like,
yeah.
And to see, people take athletes for granted, and particularly the great ones, okay? And, a lot of players try to pretend that they're great, and their social media accounts, if you look at them, you say, oh my God, this guy made one all-pro team, and everyone's praising him, and then you just shake your head. Unless you've made at least 5 of them, to me, you're a really great player, but you're not one of those iconic players. Mm-hmm. And I always hear people talking about having brands. Well, he did have a brand, okay? He didn't have to create it. He had a brand. People flocked to him. And LeBron James has a brand. Oh my goodness, Michael Jordan. And there's a few of them that have a lasting effect once they get out of the sport. And Michael in particular, okay, who I've known for years, value him as a friend. And, not to speak out of turn, but I had dinner with him the night before Kobe they had their ceremony for him at Staples Center, and Michael was going to be was going to speak. And all the years I've known Michael, he never changes. He never changes. Hmm. It's like he knows who he is, but he's a great guy to be around. You love being around him. Hmm. And there's 2 things you better like. You better like golf, and you better like fishing now. He loves to fish now, which I think is good at this point in his life. Too. And and he's just a good guy. And Kobe was a good guy. There's people you like to be around. There's a warmth about them mm-hmm. that they have. But as I say, that warmth is transcended for years. For years. And people still feel the same way about Michael Jordan. Yeah. And I think
Michael was very emotional in his talk.
Well, it was an awful day for me. There's so many things that you go back in time, all the good times you've shared with him, the times when things didn't go so well for him as a player, and to see him grow into this person who was left a huge mark in his world.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when we saw the impact of Kobe's passing, I guess I reflected on what he's meant to the city, and I reflected on, especially in the pandemic, how much sports actually mean to people. It's a big part of a lot of people's lives.
Well, you know what? In this city, that day will not be forgotten. Okay, it will be like a national holiday in Los Angeles. Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, even though this will this will slow down a lot. Okay, I think because there's so much footage of him as a player as compared to players in that last era.
Right.
Interviews, his
movie,
his just the things that you saw him do that were, and the basketball part of it. Listen, I knew how great he was. That did not. After a while, that doesn't impress you because that's who he is. And if you can't be impressed with that's who he is, then you got a problem. If you don't, if you with the game itself. But as I say, he just again, well, that I think for a while it will be etched on everyone's mind, and like everything else in this world, it does lose its velocity. But for the young kids who, people, when he first came here, you think of people who come to a basketball game, the typical age at one time I knew, I don't know now, and they brought their kids, okay, and their kids brought their kids. Mm-hmm. So because he started so young, you probably had 3 generations of people that admired him.
Yep.
And so he will be remembered forever.
Yeah, he brought a lot of joy, and I just wanted to say, and I don't know whether to ask permission or not, but I'm just going to say it. You brought us Kobe to Los Angeles, and I know you don't like credit and you like to deflect, but I just want to say thank you because you brought us Kobe Bryant, and it changed 20 years of Los Angeles history, and it enriched a lot of people's lives that we had Kobe Bryant for 20 years. So I just want to say thank you. As a Los Angelino, please don't be uncomfortable, but I just want to say thank you.
As I say, it was those were our jobs. Those are the things that I think maybe define the best moments of organizations and the people who work within an organization. But it was like I told Jerry Buss, I said, hey, we just got the best player in the draft. And we also had
we loved Vlade.
We also had another player there that, along with him, by the name of Shaquille O'Neal. Right. We got them the same year, and it brought a lot of joy to fans for a few years here in Los Angeles. But these things don't last forever. There's a lifespan for an athlete.
Yeah.
And regardless of who they are, regardless of how well they play, you wake up one day as an athlete and you say to yourself, oh my God, I've lost something. And the athletes know it themselves. And some of them play way beyond their time. And that's sad for me to see.
Yeah. Yeah, Shaquille, I remember exactly where I was when I heard that Shaquille O'Neal was coming to the Lakers, and that was a busy summer for you. It was exhausting for you, and I read that it took a toll just even on your health, just working those 2 deals. But the moments that they gave us, those, with Shaq and Kobe together, there's a quote, speaking of quotes, there's a quote that says we don't remember days, we remember moments. And the moments, and that's something about sports that's just so amazing, is all the moments. Your long shot, Chick Hearn never forgot against the Knicks in the playoffs or in the finals. But it's just a series of moments, kind of.
Well, we all have moments in our lives we'll never forget, and I think when you get to the point in time when you, those moments, certain memories of something will come up with a spoken word from someone.
Mm-hmm.
And because you lived those moments, most people didn't live them like I did, particularly with basketball players. If you had a chance to be there and be part of these players that are true difference makers, those are things you don't forget. And as I say, as I've gotten older, I appreciate a lot of things that I didn't before, because to me it was just part of getting up in the morning and wanting to do more for the Laker fans, and that's ultimately, an owner hires you and he pays you, but you really do it for the fans. You do it for the city. I played for the fans.
Yeah.
I wanted them to have an opportunity to win it, to watch us win championships and get to the NBA Finals 9 times and only win once. Mm-hmm. It was probably more difficult for me, and I'm sure our fans were so frustrated it just wasn't possible to even know how frustrated they got. But as a player, I wanted to walk away 2 or 3 times because
Really?
I had nothing more to give. And yet there was that allure of trying to get to the top of the mountain, and got there once.
Well, you got there 9 times, kind of.
Well, I got there 9 times, but look,
Yeah.
and unfortunately when you got up there, you started tumbling down backwards if you didn't. And they caught you and threw you farther down the hill.
Last thing for a couple minutes. I want to do a quick little lightning round where I give you a name and give me a couple sentences or thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Elgin Baylor.
Magnificent man, one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. Gets little or no credit for being as great as he was. I loved him like a brother.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Well, they talk about great players, and obviously I have my thoughts on great players, but this is truly a magnificent player. The easiest great player to deal with that I've ever been around in my life. He was a consummate professional, and I'm happy to say that he and I still have kind of a relationship.
Bobby Knight.
Well, Bobby Knight, one of the most unique men I've ever met in my life. Basketball genius, by the way. And he and I were friends. Used to tell me all the time that I was the greatest basketball player that ever played, and which was a compliment because I was a defensive player also. Most people you score a lot of points. They don't see you doing the other things, and obviously I think one of the things in my career that I was most proud of, even before they start later in my career when I wasn't what I was because of a knee injury, that was the strongest part of my game as a defender. And for him to say that at that point in his life, it was very meaningful for me.
Yeah.
And he was tough. He did things his own way, and some people didn't like it.
Wilt Chamberlain.
Well, he was really unique. Okay, really unique. And he always thought, I think, first of all, a lot of people thought I didn't get along with him, which is not true at all. During our last years together, he and I would have dinner together in our room before or after a game if we weren't traveling. And I got to know him differently, and he was, I think, very, very misunderstood. He would elaborate stories like make them bigger than what they were. But I really I don't think people really ever knew him. You could be really friendly with him, and he was like a chameleon sometimes. but I really enjoyed being around him, and it's too bad that I didn't meet him earlier, because I think he and I could have been friends instead of teammates.
Yeah. Chick Hearn.
Well, Chick was Chick. One of the most gifted, obviously, broadcasters, talents that we've ever seen in the broadcasting field. Laker fans adored him. They loved him. His Chickisms, his traveling with him, he liked to have a few drinks. And at that time, we had to buy a commercial. And oh my gosh, some of the things that I saw him interact with people on the plane. He'd get there and he'd make up stories about he was in World War II. He was an air ace. He shot down 150 planes and stuff like that. And the person beside him usually was a little bit older, and they'd be going, oh my God. And then he'd get up and go to the restroom or something. Isn't this the most wonderful man you've ever seen? But he truly was one of the most consummate professionals I've ever seen. He used to go to the Forum. I'd seen him come there something 2:30, and I usually, or earlier, and to start preparing for a game that night. And I many times that I usually left day of the game for lunch or something, just get away from being there all day and kind of get myself ready for watching a game. And here he was still there, preparing for the game.
Wow.
And I remember some of the famous things. I think one of the fun, some guy asked him some kind of a question that was really awkward, and he says, what was his response to this guy? He said, "Now let me get on to someone someone who has brains." That's what I think that was his response. But he was just a great guy,
yeah.
And he absolutely loved the Lakers. He left a legacy here, like Vin Scully
yeah.
has left a legacy in this town, and he's still living.
Yeah, yeah. Last one, Karen West.
Karen West and I have known each other for what, 40, my goodness.
45 years?
Oh my gosh, there you go, let's see, 44 years. She's mother of two of my youngest sons. Really bright, really smart, hardest working person. She could run any business in America. She's that smart.
Really? But
more importantly, her work ethic is off the chart. She's thoughtful. I'm fortunate to have someone like her in my life, because otherwise I don't know where my life would be. She keeps me focused on what I need to focus on.
Wonderful. This has been an honor for me.
Well, thank you very much. Enjoyed spending time with you.
So yeah, thanks so much for coming. And
well, thank you.
This is a good life. We'll see you next time.
Not close, by the way.